How is again? I've been, thinking a lot lately about star lore in megalithic cultures. Within Ireland, there's within the Celtic canon, there is no star lore as such. You don't hear stories of the Irish annals revolving around a particular star or a lunar cycle or a particular solar cycle or whatever. Now, that's not to say that didn't exist. It may well have existed in a previous shamanic, pre Celtic ancient Ireland and Britain of the Bronze Age and the Neolithic age, but we don't really have any stories about it, not even in the Brittonic literature either, or the Gaulish literature. It's very interesting. Now, for years I used to think, well, it's a bit funny that because it probably doesn't exist because our skies are not like the skies of North Africa and the Middle East. You don't have the stars in the sky every night because of all the clouds, the climatic reasons, and that I went with that for years as a plausible thing, and it probably still is. But I couldn't get it out of my head where how so many of the megalithic sites were orientated, it's particularly after Martin Brennan's The Star and the Stones, how they were so orientated towards specific astronomical alignments, risings on the horizon, and as they were appearing. And one of the greatest proofs of this is the Bahia Stone in County Mayo with its concentric rings, and it's been confirmed that on camera. And the Inner Harp people recorded a beautiful video of the rolling sun at the beginning of what they call the harvest, and the beginning of the planting season and the harvest. The sun moved up one side of Patrick as viewed from the Bahia Stone and rolled down the other. That's been confirmed. What it's to do with the harvest or not, I don't know, because I think this whole thing of agriculture being connected to the megalithic age is wildly overblown, especially in the place like Ireland and Scotland and Orkney and Cornwall, where you would have not been able to have that kind of tillage to produce that amount of cereal crops. I'd be more inclined to believe that the growth of agriculture heralded the end of the megalithic age and the megalithic builders of the Neolithic. And the reason for that is, why go to all the trouble of planting cereal crops and going to all that work of protecting them, keeping them free from weeds and rodents and everything, to get a nutritional payoff that, compared to catching a salmon, back then the rivers were abundant with salmon, the forests were abundant with deer, the coasts were abundant with shell food. We know that from the shell middens in Sligo, these towering hills that are of millions, perhaps billions of oyster and other shells that in those Neolithic times people were living on the coast. You don't even have to, when you live by the coast, the seasons are irrelevant because, yeah, it gets colder. Well, actually, it gets, the temperatures tend to be maintained by the sea, but also you don't, shellfish appear all year round. All kinds of fish are there all year round. Seaweed is there all year round. Why imprison yourself to the growing and harvesting season? So I think that whole thing of the megalithic culture being a product of in the West anyway of agriculture and agricultural technology is wildly overblown, if not false. And we know that too from the samples of food that have been found in jars and so on. It's predominantly things like roasted hazelnuts. They're roasted to preserve them over the winter. But if you live on the coast, the food is everywhere. The Atlantic is right there. It's astonishing the amount of food that you can live all year round on. Why bother planting crops when you can just go down and harvest seaweed? Why bother, you know, de-weeding on tillage, all that seriously hard work when the nutritional payoff can be, you know, offset by capturing a few salmon and drying them in the air or some other thing of fish. Anyway, so that's like one of the things that it's one of the theories that I'm putting forward in this new film, is that I think that whole thing of the agricultural cycle of the megalithic builders and the Neolithic is wildly overblown, if not false. Now, so what's the other reason for this? Now you can say, okay, so they were definitely involved. There was definitely a solar law. We know that for a fact because of places like, you know, Newgrange. We know that from Loch Crew, and we know that from the Bahia Stone in County Mayo. And there's definitely a solar element to it. If there's a solar element to it, there's a star element to it. Also, living at the coast where most people did then, there's more abundant vistas of the night sky, because you can see the stars right down to the horizon, where you can't see them in inland if you're in forests where there's, Ireland's a hilly country for the most part, hillier mountains, except the central area. But back then it's completely covered in woodlands. So you're at the coast, you see a lot more stars, okay? And a lot of these megaliths are not far from the coast. The Knocknarea, the Coolera Peninsula in Sligo, all the ones in Donegal. In fact, if you go to many of the ones like the Belthany Stone Circle in Donegal, you've got tremendous vistas there. Same with the ones in Cumbria in England. They're all designed so you have the best vista possible. Now, what's that for? A theatrical setting? Of course, yeah, but more importantly, it's for astronomical observation and ritual. Now, we know about astrology and we know about how that works, but there's another form of astral magic, well, solar celestial magic, and that was the most famous book of that is the Picatrix, which is an 11th century Arabic. Well, it was codified in Arabic that made its way into Spain a few hundred years later. And basically, the Picatrix is it's a book of basically celestial magic. In that, and this, it goes back much further. I'll explain it to you in a minute. But in that, a person's orientate, well, say the Magi's to use an Eastern term, the Magi's orientation towards a specific star planet would, at certain times in a particular place in the sky, produce with the correct altar. And the Picatrix talks all about this, how to lay the altar out and all this stuff, and what kind of herbs and oils to use as the star, as you're orientated towards a specific celestial body, and then you can harvest forces from that. Okay, that's the theory. Now, this definitely goes back much further than 11th century Islam. In fact, even the Islamic scholars admit that they try to say it could be Kabbalistic, but because it deals with the kind of thing of the etheric body or the astral body. But they got that from the Babylonians, when they were in Babylon, and so it definitely goes back to there. We know that star lore is very. Don't go to me with the Zachariah Sitchin thing and all that nonsense of the Nephilim and all that bullshit. That's all been disproven a long time ago. The star lore was very central to the Babylonians and the Sumerians, but also the Egyptians. Remember the work of like people like Robert Bauval and others. The what you call the inside the pyramids, they have those shafts, and the shafts align with certain stars at certain times of year. That you could sit in the king's chamber, or wherever that central room is called, and was called back then. And at a specific point, you could look directly up that shaft all the way through the pyramid to see, say, Sirius or some other star. So obviously, it goes way back to ancient Semitic, Persian, quite possibly Yemenite sources, pagan times. Now, when you get this, you get an insight into an ancient technology that orientates changes in human consciousness specifically towards celestial bodies, not as a sense of the kind of like the way astrology works, where the certain movements through the zodiac have a determining quality over consciousness, within consciousness, not over, say within it. But you're actually specifically using that celestial object for a reason. Now we know that existed in Neolithic Ireland. That's the best evidence for that is the Bahia stone at Picatrix, absolutely, and also the rising of the Irish Sea above, the rising of the sun above the Irish Sea, illuminating the passageways at Lough Crew, sort of like a birthing cycle. Now, and that's why Lough Crew was always associated with the female. It's the birth of the sun in Ireland every morning. It's the Cailleach. It's always associated with the female. It goes as far back as you can go. So then it seems to be that by the time this stuff was all written down by the monks in the Middle Ages, well, early Middle Ages and later, compiled from Irish, what they call Celtic, Gaelic legends, Irish legends they really are, they're not really Celtic. There's no star lore. However, I'm very suspicious about some of these Christian texts. If you look at some of these Christian texts, these books, these psalters, a lot of them don't have stuff in them to do with religion. So they do have gospels in them. And we always see the famous ones of the Book of Durrow or the Book of Kells. And they'll always open the page on something like the life of King David or the lineage of Jesus Christ. Yes, it's in the Book of Kells, by the way, the actual earthly lineage, going right back to King David. Things like the Gospels of so-and-so. They never show you the pages in books like the Book of Ballymote and others, where the monks almost codified the symbolism within there in things like Om and runes, very similar to how the Picatrix graphics are done. Which makes it sound to me that in Ireland at the time of the Druids, remember the Druids were not shamans now, they were more like kind of like a priest class / civil servants. They weren't shamans. There's no recorded evidence of shamanic shamanism in Ireland. Not even in the ancient rock art, sadly, there's not. There may have been stuff that was painted in ochre on the side of caves and stuff that vanished a long time ago. You have to really go to France to see, the caves there to see evidence of shamanism. But that's again, like the Star Law, it doesn't, just because absence of evidence doesn't mean it's conclusive. It's just probably lost. It could just be lost. Like the Roman history of Ireland is all completely lost, nearly all of it. So, was there a Picatrix like book of occult magic or culture or history of occult magic that existed in Ireland in the Neolithic period and lasted all the way through the Bronze Age in one way or another? And the same monks who wrote down the Irish annals, the mythological history of Ireland from pagan times, knew about this and included it in its books, because there's some very interesting. Now, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I will always wonder why 900 books of early Irish history are hidden from us deliberately. The Royal Irish Academy has 900 books of ancient Irish history that we're not allowed to see. They claim they don't have the resources to translate it. This society is loaded. It has a royal charter, for God's sake. It's filled with like all kinds of wealthy academics and gets endowments from all kinds of universities and everything. And they do everything except like, let us see these books or translate them. They say it's too expensive. I don't believe that. I believe there's something in those books that may have actually been hidden or protected on behalf of the Freemasons who founded the Royal Irish Academies. But I'll put them on the screen here, and you can look at pages from the Picatrix written in Arabic, and look at pages from the Irish Christian psalters books from this similar period, and there's no denying that they both look like magic books. So I think there was some kind of Picatrix like ritualism that went on in Ireland in the Neolithic age and may have survived for thousands of years. And that's where the star lore was, and that's where the possible Irish Celt, no, I won't say Irish, but the Celtic, Irish shamanic tradition may have been. And the evidence of this may be contained, other than fleeting things like the few documents we can find, and some very interesting standing stones that seem to have celestial elements on them surrounding swastikas. There's lots of them all over Ireland. And then it all went into the Royal Irish Academy, and then it's vanished. Why? Only they know. But why the book spread between Dublin, London, and Belfast? Why aren't they consolidated into one place and the translation can begin? Because I consider these books, these missing books, as vital to the history of Europe as the Qumran or the Nag Hammadi ones have been to the history of the Middle East. Just saying.